New Hampshire. Good morning, right up into Maine, seacoast of New Hampshire, and up into Portland. Good morning, New England. Good morning, worldwide. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. We'll play the pulse of NH. Jack Heath, J-Doc on this Monday morning. I guess we'll start with Mother Nature. Foggy, 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 and rainy, dreary Monday for the final day of March. And we do have some warmer temperatures today. It's actually going to get really quite a bit warmer today, J-Dog. And we got plenty to talk about. Maybe it'll be the week of the tariffs, if you will. You just heard Jared talking about that from the Fox side of things at the White House. We'll be hearing from our regular contributors this morning. It's interesting. The next day or two, President Trump calling it Liberation Day, Wednesday, the reciprocal tariffs on globally. We'll see what those specifics are. I guess devil's in the details, but already hearing this weekend locally that a lot of people go into some car dealerships locally. We had Jason LaCroix on from Auto Fair, one of our great sponsors and partners, on Thursday morning, talking about if there is, a increase in prices because of the the automobile tariffs of 25%. People are looking to go sort of save some money now and get a new vehicle. We are going to hear from some experts this morning, including some experts on what the actual tariffs mean, breaking them down. Is a 25% increase or on tariffs from automobile makers in other countries importing to the U.S. Does that translate into a 25% increase in price on vehicle? Actually, no, it doesn't, but we'll break it down. J-Dog, before we get to the heavy duty stuff, I guess on the men's side in the March Madness basketball, the Final Four, I guess all the top seeds sort of held on. All right. It's good stuff. Red Sox not really ending great in Texas, but we have baseball underway again. Mm, I heard that they move up that Baltimore game a little bit because of the rain. Yeah. Bruins lost their last 8 in a row. Oh, well, he he might get them all. He might get them all tomorrow night. I don't know the last time a player did that, but he could get a couple. All right, we have a lot going on. We're also going to hear from Adam on our one of the results of markets being down on Friday and going into this week for so-called Liberation Day, the reciprocal tariffs that the Trump administration is going to announce globally. We are hearing from Adam that the gold prices are shooting through the roof. So a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's sort of the theme as we say goodbye to March on this day. But some of the other news talk happening, the anti-Musk protest really escalating over the weekend, namely or mainly against Tesla as an indirect or direct way to protest Elon Musk. He's focusing, though, in Wisconsin on that local election there. Plus, there's two interesting Florida House races that are happening on Congress and congressional side. We hear from Brad Card on that because the we know that margin of the Republican majority in the House is like razor thin. So we have a lot going on as we get going. Hope you had a good weekend. It's hard to. I was thinking this morning before the show. We are going to have some perspective in the next segment. I'm talk a little bit about what Bill Clinton did when he was president in terms of cutting almost 400,000 federal jobs. And some people say, oh, it's different how Bill Clinton did it because he included Congress. But Bill Clinton, in that administration, when they worked to balance the budget and bring federal spending under control and cut the size of the federal government by almost 400,000 jobs. That's true. A lot more than Elon Musk is and Doge going through the federal waste and cutting down on federal employees and stuff, the size of the federal government, a lot less than Bill Clinton. But I guess people say, "Well, that was different." Yeah, maybe because it wasn't Trump and Musk. We'll come back to some of that. Let's talk about the tariffs, though. Doug Tengden on the World Advisors side of thing, worldadvisor.com, is talking a little bit about a lot about this. He usually goes towards the end of this. I want to bring in Doug early this morning because talking about reciprocal tariffs globally on Liberation Day, Wednesday, Doug, President Trump coming out of the weekend talking about it. First of all, we have some time. Please kind of walk us through. We don't have the details yet. Markets aren't liking this because it adds to more uncertainty. But now it's a global thing. It's not just targeting Canada, Mexico, and China. President Trump's talking globally, saying that we've been ripped off more than any country ever has. Take it away, Doug. Good morning. Right. Well, Doug, explain this to me. President Trump coming back to the White House this morning saying these tariffs, reciprocal, will bring in a lot of money to America. They'll bring in a lot of money. Result in a lot of money. But in the meantime, they're really going to send the global markets haywire. We've seen that domestically with just the Canada Mexico talk of tariffs. So talk us through that a little bit. Is this a short term thing? Is it more than a hiccup? Because, we're going into the spring here, and, a lot of people are looking at, we're getting into that, a new month tomorrow. People are looking at this with a lot of uncertainty. What is that? What are your thoughts on this? Right. Wait, it's very clear to me that I think President Donald Trump thinks the mid to long term gain is worth the short term uncertainty pain. Do you think you'll end up being right? Hmm. It Right, but it right, but there's a political gamble and there's an economic gamble, and the political gamble is determined by the economic because if people start feeling this is a good thing mid to long term to bring have companies invest more, make more here, which is what President Trump has been saying, manufacture here, bring money back into this country. He does feel, and when you look at the last thing I want to ask you this is when you look at these tariffs like Canada and some of these other countries. A lot of people assume that President Trump, and the administration raising tariffs now globally or on these other countries for goods that are exported in the United States, that we're being the greedy ones. But if you look at some of these other countries, there's some pretty hefty tariffs that they've imposed on our goods. Correct? Right. 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 Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and a lot of these pharmaceuticals are made in China as well. So, all right. All right. Interesting. That would take some time. All right, thank you, Doug. Worldmarketadvisors.com. Thank you, Doug Tangdon. All right. All right, we'll break down this a little more because it is one of those weeks as we kind of say goodbye to March. I guess some people sort of central north, interior sections up in the north and out western part of New Hampshire and parts of depending on where you were, a lot of ice came down the last couple of days and froze the lines. Not so much on the seacoast and south, but some power outages still this morning after a wet weekend. And we continue with some fog and dreary Monday. Back on the Pulse of an H in a moment. All right, welcome back on this Monday morning, and we have a lot going on. There's certainly no shortage of things to talk about nationally. We'll have more of our regular contributors on this Monday. Statewise, here locally, I believe the House and Senate are all the stuff they normally do. I think this is sort of an off week in Concord, so it may be a little quieter here. But what we're hearing on that U.S. Senate, the big U.S. Senate race here in New Hampshire, and a lot of people are playing up the Axios report on Chris Pappas that they reported that he had talked to colleagues that he's going to make a decision here or as early as this week on running for the U.S. Senate as the member of the first district congressman from New Hampshire. But it was 2 Wednesdays to go on this show when he announced on Good Morning New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H right here 2 Wednesdays ago that he was kicking off that morning. He announced, he said, Jack, I'm kicking off a 10-county tour. When I asked him if he's considering a run for Congress, he said, yes, seriously considering a run for the Senate, seriously considering a run for the U.S. Senate, the seat that Gene Shaheen's not running again for. So Pappas was on that Wednesday morning when I asked him point blank, yes, seriously considering a run for the U.S. Senate, kicking off a 10-county statewide tour. And he did that, and he said he would, be making a decision shortly. And now I think it could be as early this week. So I have little doubt Chris Pappas is running for the U.S. Senate. He talked about it first right here on the Pulse of an H before Axios. But number two, we also had the Friday before that, former Governor Chris Sununu calling into the show, sort of last minute, saying that the door was cracked open and he was serious. He did not use the word serious, but he said he's considering a run for the U.S. Senate, former Governor Sununu. But he did go out of his way to say if he did run, he thought he would win the race. He said he would win the race if he ran for the U.S. Senate. Scott Brown also called in a day or two later the following week saying he is still looking at this seriously. And then we had Maggie Goodlander in the 2nd Congressional District on the show the day after Chris Pappas was. She's saying, when I asked her, she said she is considering, but I would tend to think that I think it's highly unlikely that you would see Maggie Goodlander and Chris Pappas, the two members of Congress currently, 1st and 2nd Congressional Districts, sort of going at each other head to head in a primary. I think Pappas is trying to freeze the field by saying he's seriously considering and getting into this early. And then there's the question again of Chris Sununu. One thing that's interesting, and some of our contributors will be talking about this in a little bit. If you are running for U.S. Senate, any of these people, if they're serious, they're essentially already running because they're talking to people, they're meeting with strategic people, they're trying to line up financial support and other key support. So the folks that are serious are really, whether they've announced it or not, are already running. Scott Brown's in that category. Chris Pappas is in that category. Brown is already gone to Washington a few times to meet with people. We did hear sources telling Good Morning New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H, that Chris Sununu, despite some sort of back and forth or a little bit of not a great relationship with Donald Trump when he was a candidate, but Sununu did before November 5th come around saying that he was fully supportive of Donald Trump in the race against Kamala Harris. But still, we did hear, despite the back and forth that used to be not the best of buddies kind of thing between Sununu and Donald Trump, we did hear that the Trump folks were encouraging Chris Sununu to look at running for the U.S. Senate because they feel he'd be the best one to win that seat. But we are not hearing from our friends in Washington. There's a lot of chatter on the Sununu front in terms of running for the U.S. Senate, which might tell you that that maybe Sununu won't end up doing this, but we don't know. We're in that window. But that's one to keep an eye on, even if things are kind of quiet in Concord this week. Speaking of all this tariff stuff, I'll be totally candid with you. I really don't understand a lot of the strategy around tariffs. I understand what tariffs are. By the way, they're not new. This is certainly an administration that has done a lot of firsts. I mentioned earlier the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton, who was a Democrat president, by the way, if you recall, two-term, actually cut and terminated more federal jobs. The Clinton administration, they led more terminations of federal jobs, much more than what Elon Musk and Doge and the Trump administration are currently doing. However, you're seeing a lot of firsts because Doge is going through this with the appointment of the president, not necessarily proposing to Congress to vote on these staff reductions or the federal cutbacks or looking at, a lot of the stuff that they're going through the federal budget. Musk is doing this with his team. under the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, which is a new thing. Ironically, states have set up their own version of this, including New Hampshire, including Florida, and about 12 other states, looking for more efficient government operations and eliminating any taxpayer waste or just basic waste. So the federal government, this is continuing. But the tariff stuff is a strategy that President Donald Trump talked about running this time around more than ever. In the first term, he talked about it, but this time he's really, first term he was talking tough on China. This term he's really escalated the use or the tool, the economic or political tool of tariffs. They're as much a political tool, by the way, as they are economic, because you can talk about it. And then if another country changes something and you get something out of them, you don't have to impose the tariffs. But now President Trump's talking about Liberation Day this Wednesday, Liberation Day, the second day of April. He's talking about reciprocal global tariffs. What does that mean? What do tariffs mean? How do they really work? Not what they are. So if you say you're doing a 15 or 10% or 25% tariff on something in Canada or another country, I get how that works. But what does it mean in the marketplace? What does it actually mean for the purchasing price of consumers? For example, automobiles. Will people here, because I'm already hearing that people have been going to local car dealerships over the weekend to look at maybe getting that vehicle now for the spring if prices are going to go up with automobile tariffs? Is it a 25% increase or not? We're going to go to a really top business expert, someone who I know very, very well in terms of his forte on business as well as what he's done in the past. He's also helping the state right now, Governor Kelly Ayotte, on a similar local version of Doge. By he and some other leaders are helping to identify more efficient financial operations for the state of New Hampshire at the request of Governor Kelly Ayotte, as she faces a pretty tough budget with even less money than they thought before. So we're going to check in with former New Hampshire Governor Craig Benson in a moment, who understands this economic stuff far better than me. And maybe we can break this down for you, because a lot of this is just news reports. And we just had Doug Tangton on, but it's really hard to still understand what reciprocal tariffs globally will mean. Are they a good or bad thing mid to long term? That's coming up next on the Pulse of an H. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Jack, Heath, J Dog on the boards. Back with that next. All right, kind of a dreary Monday as we usher out March and bring in April, and I guess Wednesday, Liberation Day. What does that mean when it comes to reciprocal tariffs globally? I guess it's the week of tariffs, but it's really been ongoing. Markets don't seem to like it in terms of the uncertainty. But what does it mean? What do these really mean? It's really hard to break this down. And I think, in a strange, well, I may be wrong, maybe strange way, politically speaking. I think President Trump, in some respects, may like the fact that they're complicated for most people because a lot of people don't understand how tariffs actually work. We're bringing in former New Hampshire Governor Craig Benson, who I believe he also teaches college still. People don't know this down at Babson College in Massachusetts. He's done a lot there on the entrepreneurial side, but from a business point of view, probably understands this stuff as well as anyone out there, maybe including some people in the White House. And I thought if anyone could break this down a little bit, what it means locally, for example, automobile tariffs. Does that mean you're spending 25% more on a vehicle you buy here? Former Governor Craig Benson joining us. Good morning, New Hampshire, the pulse of an H. Thanks for trying to put some insight on this. Okay, so I'm sure you're asked this question almost daily. It's in the news, it's everywhere. You can't turn on a news report now or a show without hearing the word tariff. A lot of people don't like it, a lot of uncertainty. What is it? What does some of these mean? And maybe we should just focus on automobile tariffs for a moment to understand this better. Hmm. 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 Makes sense. Yep. Right. Hmm. Right. And now a lot of manufacturers fall in that category. Hyundai, Honda, Nissan, a lot of Toyota. Yeah, Toyota. Yeah, they may be sort of headquartered in other countries, but they have a US base. So you're saying within the company that's going to be tariffed, they have some wiggle room there on what they charge internally. And then also their tax stuff so that in the end, it may not be 25% to the American consumer on a lot, for example, at Auto Fair in Manchester or Stratham, New Hampshire. Okay. Oh, so that's when sometimes President Trump says, "We're gonna get more money here." Is that what he's referring to? Right, right, right. And I heard, for example, that Honda, I think, was moving a hybrid Civic operation and division out of Mexico to the United States, and that's something the president would refer to as saying, "See, I'm getting them to make things here again. Spend the money here." So that's when he's talking about this. That's sort of the method to the tariff madness. Mhm. Right. And when he says, "Make things here, bring back manufacturing here, bring more money to America." The other interesting thing he said coming out of this weekend to reporters is, "We're getting ripped off. The United States is getting ripped off by countries around the world on this tariff stuff more than anyone else." So he obviously he has a game plan here. Now politically, whereas you explain it economically, former Governor Craig Benson, business expert, I understand, I think, more politically what he's doing than economic, because I can see playing tough with China. They hold a lot of our, consumer debt, but they probably are aggressive. Mexico and Canada, some people have asked, why is he playing so many games with Canada? We feel that here in New Hampshire, but I think overall I kinda see politically what he's trying to accomplish. The thing I wonder is if markets get so uncertain locally, our US markets and globally, and, I'm not saying we're gonna teeter on a recession, but isn't that a risky short-term economic play for the long-term political gain? Or is it something that we just don't know how this is gonna play out? And the other thing I notice is he'll say something like Wednesday, all these reciprocal tariffs, and then when they come out, they're watered down more than the media sort of forecasted them to be. Aluminum, yeah, right. Well, it yeah, and again, it's a little bit complicated because if you ask the average person to break down what are tariffs, I think they'd have a hard time. Well, I think there's some members of Congress who'd have a hard time answering you. But to your point on timber and wood, my late father-in-law explained to me why paper operations and wood operations in northern Maine and New Hampshire, places like Groveton, New Hampshire, places like Millinocket, Maine, were going out of business, and he said it was because the Canadians subsidized their wood industry so much we couldn't compete. So that was decades ago, and he was probably right on that. So Yeah, they're gone. I mean, they basically are ghost towns. Those old mills are being converted to something. So as this plays out, right now we're not sure on how any of this is translated. But the one thing we haven't talked about before I let you go, former Governor Craig Benson trying to break down tariffs. Basically, the conclusion so far is big companies and automobile companies that have home operations, for example, in South Korea or Japan with Toyota or Honda or Nissan, they have a lot of US operations and they can kind of play this internal game on what they charge each other to transfer something that's partly made here to there. So the tariffs you're saying on automobiles may not equate to exactly 25% increase. It could be far less. Is that pretty much fair? Increase. Right. But what we've not talked about before I let you go is the worry about inflation. And that's a legitimate economic subject because we still are seeing overall high prices. And that's something that I think people really are concerned about. And I'm worried about because I don't know what the Fed will do with interest rates, but inflation, if that continues to be a problem for most people, and it is right now, everything's expensive. If these tariffs sort of add to inflation, that's not probably very good. But maybe it's just a short term thing. I don't know. Mhm. Not to mention markets, because you see these markets fluctuate, so people go and they get nervous on their 401k if the markets are down. Well, it's gonna be quite a week, and we'll have to wait, I guess, to see what the details are for Wednesday on so-called Liberation Day, but the automobile industry is a good breakdown, but you can understand how why some of this goes right over people's heads. Right. Can you repeat the last thing you said about the historically, the US, just one more time? So in other words, President Trump may not be wrong when he says we've been getting a raw deal, but you don't see the but that's funny, isn't it funny? That's not the lead on ABC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, and a lot of the national media. That's not the lead they have. All right. I appreciate the expertise, Professor Benson. Thank you. All right, good stuff. So that's interesting. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the pulse of an HR poll question, by the way, up on X. We'll tell you the results from Friday is this week because tariffs are still in the news. Do you think reciprocal tariffs globally are a good thing? Yes or no? Do you think the global tariffs that the president's talking about on Wednesday, so-called Liberation Day, are they a good thing or bad thing? Do you think global tariffs to sort of balance the trading tables are a good or a bad thing? That's up on X at the Pulse of an H. Back in a moment. All right, as we get going back here on I guess it's, J Dog. I know that Mondays are not your and probably not a lot of our listeners' favorite day of the week, but something about when it's kind of dreary and rainy out there, but it's going to get warmer today. Hard to believe. No fooling. No fooling. We are bringing in April tomorrow, J Dog. That's, I guess no matter what, that's going to come. And so we do have some actually going to be, I think, about 60, low 60s for a high today. Is that what you're hearing? Milder? Yeah, I know. You're in a mood. But you get to go to your beloved Cleveland next week, right? No, but you get to look forward to that next week. All right. So hard to know where all this plays out, but President Donald Trump and the Trump administration are playing more economic hardball with countries in terms of the U.S. It's interesting, though, the perspective you do not get, from the national media on stories like that. Why? Because these are political perspectives. And there may be there is a political equation to what the Trump administration's thinking about doing on tariffs, because if things do grow economically in America, if manufacturing increases and more money comes into the country, I don't know, unless your goals are anti-American, who wouldn't say that's a good thing? But if you're anti-Trump, obviously Elon Musk is now the sort of the bad boy of the administration, if you will, through Doge. You're not going to look for any good in this. But when you do have an economic expert on, and the people on Wall Street don't like it because of market uncertainty. They don't like when the markets swing down more than up. People on Wall Street make money off the swings up and down, but they like it when markets are strong for an average type of predictable income. Everyone's going to make a living. But it's interesting when you hear someone like former Governor Craig Benson, who knows business and the economy and jobs better than most people I know, explain that for historically, the U.S. is paying more to other countries in tariffs than they do to us. So let me repeat that. Historically, the United States is paying far more in tariffs to other countries than they are paying in tariffs to us. So when the president says we're getting the raw end of the deal, he's not incorrect, but you won't see that on a lot of the networks. You won't see ABC or CBS say tonight, in an attempt by the Trump administration to balance the trade wars, where historically the United States is charged more on goods we export than on goods we receive. You won't hear that headline. You won't see that headline on the news because everything's so political. So we'll see where it goes. The short term things I do worry about, and we talked about it in our previous guest, are inflation and the economy. And right now we're coming into we have a new month tomorrow in April, so we're into the new year. And I won't even mention the term tax season. We're into the new year, and the markets, for the most part, have been more down than up, and inflation is not getting better. And I'm concerned about that because inflation is ripped into most. You heard former Governor Craig Benson talk about that from a business point of view. Inflation cuts into your net worth because things cost more. I mean, inflation is a very unfair tax because everyone's paying more. But if you have a fixed income, you're paying more of your income for things because they're more expensive. So we've been looking and hoping that inflation would start to come down. And at some point here, I'm acutely concerned about inflation because that's an indicator on a lot of things. And who knows what the Federal Reserve will do on interest rates. And the second thing is the economy, because of uncertainty. So the mid to long term, I've said this when this started, this whole tariff talk with Canada and Mexico, the mid to long term gain from tariffs is there. The question is, what's the short term pain to get the mid to long term gain? What's the short term pain to get the mid to long term gain of tariffs? Because if you are, and Craig Benson focused on like Kia, or if you're a Hyundai and you're a Honda and you're moving operations to the United States because of promised tariffs, and you don't want to pay more to produce and export, so you make it here, which is good. It takes a while to move an operations plant. It takes a while to start producing the Honda Civic in America versus Mexico. It takes a while to start moving stuff operationally. That's going to take months. and we'll see some short-term announcements. And certainly, obviously, um, President Trump is rolling the dice here. He believes that this is really the right thing to make and bring more money. It's interesting on the tax stuff. No one talks about the tax equation of tariffs. So if a big international automobile manufacturer moves around the internal stuff to pay less tariff, but they make more money, they're going to pay the United States if they're headquartered here too, more in income tax. So there's a double-edged sword, but we'll see where it goes. All right, coming up, we're talking about the price of gold. Our friends at the Alpine Gold Exchange shooting up through the roof. Back on the Pulse of an H on a Monday. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Back in a few.